John, what year were you born and what are some things that you remember about your childhood?
I was born in 1923 in a rural area in southern Mississippi during the Great Depression. And I remember that we had, like most people living in the rural areas at that time, which was true for most people, it was a tough time. My parents worked extremely hard to provide for us, both materially and in other ways. And we learned to work at an early age because it was necessary. We learned to be self-reliant and a contributing member of the family. And of course, from the religious point of view, I remember going to local churches and sitting on homemade wood benches and listening to itinerant preachers come in and tell us we was all going to hell if we didn't change our ways. And
What were the world events that impacted your life the most?
well, the two greatest events, of course, was the Great Depression and World War II. And now really that was a turning point in America in the history of the country. Because prior to that time, as I said earlier, most people lived in rural, small town areas and small subsistence farms. And because of the tremendous change in events of World War II, after the war, the majority of the people moved to cities and large towns and where they had electricity and running water and all the advantages of the things that came afterwards. One of the, you can't separate who you are from the experiences you've had. And I was impacted by the fact that the Marines sent me through a radar school for 13 months, and then I served as a radar technician during the rest of the war and learned that I loved science and was interested in it. And then when the war was over, one of the next great things that was done was the GI Bill. For the first time in history, a large percentage of the young adults got a college education, and that made all the difference in the world. Tom Brokaw wrote his book calling this, my generation, the greatest generation. And I found myself arguing with him all the way through it, but well, really my parents were the generation was the greatest generation because they reared us and instilled in us the lessons that we needed to get through the war and help make the country better after the war.
John, where'd you serve during the war?
I left home in 1942 and at that time I'd never been more than about 50 or 60 miles away from where I was born, and that was typical of most young men during that time. But I went to, Marines sent me to boot camp in San Diego, and as soon as I finished boot camp, they sent me to radar school where I went to colleges in Chicago and Pennsylvania, and then radar school in Corpus Christi, and then Army Signal Corps School in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and then I served at several different stations and finally ended up going overseas and I served as in an air warning squadron where radar was used to detect incoming enemy planes and radar was used to detect fighters out to intercept them. And I served in Zamboanga and Island of Mindanao in the southern Philippines, and then after the war, served in about 6 months near Beijing, which was at that time called Piping, China, while they were airlifting the nationalist government out of what is now Beijing. We kept the communists out in the countryside from taking the cities. And then after the war, when I came home, I went to, on the GI Bill, went to college and Peabody College and Vanderbilt University, and got a master's degree in chemistry and a minor in biology. Then after teaching 2 years, I went to LSU for a year of graduate study in biochemistry, and then Following that, I worked as a research and development chemist with the DuPont chemical company. And then I worked as a laboratory supervisor for the Atomic Energy Commission plant run by Union Carbide Company. And then I went back to teaching and stayed in teaching the rest of my life and taught in 6 different colleges in 5 different states. And retired in 1988 and then taught part-time 9 more years. So that pretty well gave me a lot of experience and learned a lot of things from living in a lot of different places and knowing a lot of different people.
John, you talked a little bit about growing up, going to church in Mississippi. Just wanted to ask, in a few words, what would you say it means to you to follow Jesus?
I follow the teachings of Jesus because I think pretty much the core of what Christianity is was summed up in his answer to the question of what is God's greatest commandment, and that is to love others as you love yourself. That's, to me, that's the crux of Christianity, and Jesus' life was devoted to trying to help others, primarily opposing the cruelty of the Roman government that people lived under and the avarice of the temple leaders, priests and rabbis. So I'd sum up by saying that I started out in little country churches where the main sermon was we were born lost sinners and all going to hell if we didn't join the church. And I've come to believe that that's not necessarily the truth story, that there's a lot of doubt involved, and you need to learn to live with doubt and trust in your own ability to think and reason and inquire into whatever avenue you can where you have questions, not just blithely take somebody else's word for what you should believe.
Well, John, why did you and Peggy join Broadway Baptist Church? Why are you still a member there?
Well, we had been attending First Baptist Church of Euless, and this was about the time that there began to be a separation going on in the church between fundamentalism and moderate religious views. Jimmy Draper, who was our pastor, was kind of caught in the middle. I think he, early on, and while we attended that church, we attended there 10 years, didn't we, Peggy? He was, had a more broad, moderate view of religion, but then when he saw which way the Southern Baptist Convention was going, he switched over and became more and more fundamentalist. We became disillusioned with the church and decided that we need to move. It wouldn't fit our beliefs and didn't know where to go, of course. So I called Dr. Dilday, who was then president of the Southern Baptist Convention and under attack and later fired because he didn't agree with the fundamentalists, and asked him what churches he'd recommend. He said, well, unfortunately, he could really only recommend 2. When I described to him what we were looking for, and one was Broadway and one other was the First Baptist Church in Arlington. We attended both, and though at first Broadway was a little off-putting because it was so formal and didn't sing the old hymns that we were used to and so on, but we finally decided that based on the beauty of the sanctuary and the openness of the people, we had some friends that invited us to Sunday school class, and we discovered that they discussed things more into our way of thinking, less doctrinaire. So we decided to join Broadway, and we have been very glad we did because Broadway comes closer to being what a church, in our opinion, should be like.
John, what are the greatest challenges that we face as a church, and what are the things that you're most excited about that are happening at Broadway?
Well, I think one of the greatest challenges of all churches is not losing young people. And that's a real danger because young people are better educated today and think for themselves more today and learn more about science and what the world is really like and are not as quick to just believe what somebody tells them to believe. In other words, I think there are more young people today that are critical thinkers than they have been in the past because they're better educated, have more knowledge. I think Broadway is doing, from what I can tell, of course I have limited access to knowledge, that Broadway is doing a good job of attracting young people. Our churches will fade away if we don't have young people come in. And if older people don't realize that and welcome young people and treat them as individuals and that think for themselves, our church is going to shrivel and die. I think, in my opinion, and it's based on really a lifetime opinion, is that Broadway does a real good job of trying to help those that need to be helped. And that's more appealing to young people and to people that are serious about their religion than some doctrinaire negative approach to religion. I think the thou shalt not kind of religion might have worked at one time to attract members, but it doesn't any longer. So I think Broadway is doing a good job in that, and I see that as a challenge for the future of all churches, not just Broadway. But I would predict, and I don't make predictions that weren't true, didn't pan out, but I would predict that 100 years from now there'll be more churches like Broadway and fewer of the churches that are doctrinaire and know-it-all and you believe what I believe or else you're a lost sinner and that sort of thing.
John, what particular gift do you think your generation gives to the church?
I think the older generation always has wisdom from acquired through experiences that young people don't have, and gained insights by spending years of trying to find answers to questions and answer doubts, and therefore that can be beneficial to young people that have doubts, because to not have doubts is ridiculous. When we're trying to deal with anything that we don't thoroughly understand and which we'll never understand why we were here and how it all came about, and all the aspects of that we strive to understand about religion.
What advice would you share with younger generations?
Probably one of the first things I would advise younger generations to do is to continue to study throughout life. A high school diploma and a college graduation is just the preparation for a lifetime of study. The more you read, the more experiences you have, the more opportunity you have to learn. And to acquire knowledge is one of the gifts that God gave us, and then learning to use it to think wisely, which means thinking critically, looking at all sides of a question rather than just grabbing onto one answer and assuming you have that answer. So my advice would be, I think what all of us do when we go to church, we're seeking understanding and answers. We shouldn't expect to discover them, but the more we seek, the better, more insight we get and the better understanding we acquire. But also I think we have to learn to live with doubt. There are some things that we just are beyond our capacity to understand. But there are a lot of things that are within our ability to understand that we don't understand simply because we don't acquire enough knowledge. Our brain puts two and two together while we sleep even, but this two and two has got to be there first.